final question is thinking about, you've worked in so many different spheres of leadership. What have been your biggest lessons that you have learned that you want to share?
So I'm coming back, and I'm probably just going on about the same thing, but this importance about taking the time to make yourself aware of your own emotions, so becoming self-aware, understanding the effect that our thoughts and beliefs have on the way that we feel and behave, and that in turn also affects how we come across to other people, particularly how we react under pressure. The other thing that I think is important is that I've learned is understanding that we cannot necessarily control everything about a situation or the behavior of other people, but we can control how we react to that. And coming back to the thing about strengths and knowing your strengths and harnessing them. But like I said, there's also this flip side to it. So just for me, that it's being aware that under periods of stress or extreme pressure, they can work against me. So I need to be mindful of that. So for example, I know from psychological assessment that my top strengths are that I'm methodical and meticulous and striving. So firstly, if we look at the positive side, the strengths of someone being methodical and meticulous, that means that I'm very organized. I take a lot of pride in my work and delivering it to a high standard, and that I'm able to provide structure to other people. However, when I'm feeling stressed and things maybe aren't going to plan, I can spend a lot of time trying to get things perfect. And then there's a danger of me coming across as overbearing to others, which could actually put them off and demotivate them, which is the complete opposite of what I want to do. So I've learned that I need to keep an eye on this and ensure that whilst I'm trying my best to deliver work to a very high standard, also accepting that sometimes good enough is just good enough. And it's important to be flexible. Again, I suppose this comes back to this whole resilience piece, being able to adapt to change. And it's really, really important for us to be flexible. As we know, things are just changing, well, at the moment on a daily basis. Coming back to the positive emotions about trying to stay optimistic and then communicating with other people and keeping on encouraging and motivating them. And keeping them on board. So again, yes, I mentioned about importance of being flexible, open to new experiences, actively putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, and being able and willing to learn new things and to see things from different perspectives. Sometimes we can get stuck in silos, especially if we're working maybe on the same sort of projects and the same sort of people, the same sort of sectors. It can be difficult to then, if everyone agrees with you, then to just go along with that. But sometimes, if you put yourself outside of your comfort zone and maybe do something that may not have necessarily appealed to you straight away, you could learn something from that and see things from a different perspective. And so I think all of that, it helps us to become more resilient, and it helps us to adapt to change and to these challenging circumstances. Another thing that I've learned is that it's really important to take the time to be aware of your values. In other words, what's important to you. I mentioned purpose earlier on. One of the values that I have, which is attached to the way that I lead, is actually being proud. So this means that I take pride in my work, and I also focus on gaining a fulfillment from the role I'm working in and the work that I produce. And I also strive and support others to deliver high professional standards. I'm really motivated by achieving results that I can be proud of, and then I gain satisfaction from achieving goals and striving to ensure the best possible outcome for everyone. Now, since I became aware of this, in hindsight, I realized that there have been times in my career where, I've maybe felt a bit lost or frustrated, which, probably also shows where these different career pivots come in. And actually, a lot of time, this was down to me maybe not being able to work on projects that were in line with my values. And sometimes it might have also been down to working with people or organizations where our values didn't quite match. And that led to a kind of uncomfortableness and a restlessness. And that's something that I now feel that I'm a lot more aware of, when I enter into working relationships. I've got a few other things, so if you want
so I think that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about values, because you mentioned it as a follow-up. Is I think it's really important to have your values and make them sort of unchangeable, whatever environment you go in. But you did touch on the idea, what happens if you work in an organisation where the values differ? And I think that your insights saying, okay, being aware of that, and really knowing what to do in those situations, I think is really important. So I think, and the other thing you mentioned about having a critical friend, so having someone challenge you, we're working in environments, I think that's really, really important as well. So I think there's some really key aspects. Any other, you were mentioning some other points you want?
Yeah, so a couple more. I was thinking of other things that I've learned over the years is also just the importance of tapping into and developing my support network. So, surrounding myself with people who are positive and appreciative, and also supportive of my goals and my dreams. Also, and again, I think this is something that's easy for us to forget about sometimes when we're under stress, and also when a lot of us are working from home and on computers a lot more of the time, is this aspect about health and well-being and looking after ourselves, both physically and mentally. And, there's simple things like taking regular breaks, exercising, getting outdoors and connecting with nature, looking at what you eat, trying to eat as well, as nutritiously as you possibly can, sleeping well, making sure you have that support network around you. And something else that, again, I've only just really started to harness a bit more recently is also celebrating achievements. And what I mean by that is not just once you've achieved maybe a big goal that you've been working towards, but along the way. So, if you are looking at smaller steps that you're taking to get somewhere, because your bigger goal, something you might be wanting to achieve, could be months or years down the line. And actually, we've all got to enjoy the journey. So, sometimes you can be striving to achieve something and get there, and then just feel a bit unfulfilled and kind of think, oh, okay, so this is it. I thought everything was going to be amazing when I'd achieved this. And the other thing I think for us to remember, and again, I think something that, the world we're living in at the moment is just reinforced, is just this whole thing about how life is just so unpredictable. And also, we might have a goal in mind, but actually it's quite rare in life that things turn out exactly as we're planned. And so I think this whole thing about being open to experiences and enjoying the journey along the way, and also celebrating, what might seem like small steps towards that purpose or that goal, is also really important. So some of the more practical things I've started doing, which I hadn't done for years and years, is also just, acknowledging positive comments about my work, trying to capture those, and also asking people for recommendations and testimonials. I think in the past I would shy away from that and be like, oh, it's nothing. And now thinking, well, actually, we all go through times where maybe things aren't going exactly to plan and we can feel a little bit down, and actually being able to then look at those kind words of gratitude that other people have given to you is also really important.
I think what you were saying that merges into two things is the idea of having a network, and I think you've been so great at doing that, because every time we come across each other, you're doing something else and you're networking and you've got your LinkedIn, and I think that's part of the expansion of your sort of business, and the importance of having those connections, those networks, both professionally, but also having a wider sort of social network. And also, I think part of the journey, I think we talk about the mountaintop experiences, but also celebrating the way on the journey, how we've got there, and maybe again, the relationships that we've built along the journey, the connections that we've made, I think are really important, and they help you keep an eye on those moments when they can encourage you, and you can get feedback from them is fantastic. So that's so much so much, those nuggets of wisdom in our talk. Now, I think we've covered all of the things we want to cover. Any last thoughts, any reflections that you want to end with?
Yeah, so what I'd say is always ask, what can I learn from this experience? Instead of seeing instances where things didn't work out as failures, try to focus on the positive things and the things that you learned, and maybe, things that you might do differently. But like I was trying to say before, I think there's something about being open to new experiences. Unless it's something that really feels uncomfortable and your gut is telling you, yes, don't do this. I think getting a little bit out of your comfort zone, if it's something that you can see is, heading towards that higher purpose or goal that you have in mind, is important. And so learning from experiences. I'd also say gratitude. So I mentioned about, asking yourself for people's testimonials and recommendations and that kind of thing. But also, I think it's really, really important to thank other people and to let them know that you appreciate them and to support people. So I mentioned earlier about this whole concept of lift as you climb. And, helping other people along the way. And that might mean, even just having a 10-minute conversation with someone who wants to pick your brain about something that you've done in the past and wanted to understand what your experience was about that. And so there's this whole thing about, supporting other people to fulfill their potential. And the other thing, I came across this saying the other day, which just stuck with me. I had to write it down. I normally don't write these things down, but it said, failure is impossible if you stay on your path. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, this comes back to this thing of understanding what's important to you, and just recognizing that, there are always going to be times where you might feel like you're taking a few steps back. But if you pick yourself up again and try and keep on moving, things will work out in the end. Even if they don't work out exactly as you planned, there is probably some higher purpose there. And so just to keep on going.
I think that's about your work with resilience and resilient leaders. So I know that you do some coaching, so maybe you want to spend a little bit of time talking about that, and maybe we're going to put a link to your website so people can contact you.
Great. Yes. So with my coaching, so as a coaching psychologist, what I do is I've trained, what's really important to me, and I suppose that's also from my public health background, is using evidence-based approaches. So what I do with the coaching psychology is apply psychological coaching techniques to my coaching practice. And so there are various techniques, but one of them, for example, is a cognitive behavioral approach. So you would have heard about cognitive behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral coaching has techniques and approaches that can be used more widely. And it comes back to this whole thing I was mentioning earlier around self-awareness, and about us being able to recognize our emotions and our thoughts and our beliefs and our behaviors, and also, physically with our physiology, how all of those things interact and relate to each other. And working with people just really to be able to help them to understand, there might be some beliefs that have been ingrained even from childhood that have stuck with us, things like I'm not good enough, which are then resulting in procrastination. Sometimes they come out as perfectionism. They can be coming out as a kind of imposter syndrome where, you're forever thinking, someone's going to find me out. Why am I, why have I been asked to do this? And helping people just to understand maybe that thoughts are thoughts, and that if we can change some of those unhelpful thought patterns to more positive thought patterns, that in turn is going to impact on the way that we feel, the way we relate to other people, the way that we behave, the way that we feel physically in our stress levels. So that's just one aspect of some of the work I do. And then also using, stress management techniques, looking at Other things like psychological assessments to look at our strengths and our values, our decision-making styles, our leadership styles, so that we can just, like I say again, come back to self-awareness, which I think is just really, really important. I very often say it's the first step in helping you to then move forward and to build that resilience.
Excellent. So thank you so much. We're going to end the talk now. We're going to have your contact details on the screen. But thank you so much. It's been a really interesting Leadership Insight video. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.